My sister looked at me over her son's first birthday cake and blew my entire world apart. "My son is your late husband's child," she announced loudly, making sure everyone in the room heard. "And as his inheritance, I'm taking half of your $800,000 house." The room fell completely dead silent. My hands began to shake, and my vision blurred as she proudly slapped a legal-looking will onto the table. Everyone at the party stared at me, expecting me to burst into tears, scream, or completely lose my mind. My sister smirked, convinced she had just delivered the ultimate life-destroying blow. But instead of crying, I took a deep breath, looked her straight in the eyes, and had to force myself to hold back an absolute explosion of laughter. She didn't know it yet, but her greedy trap had just sprung on herself. Follow my story until the end to see why. My name is Lisa, and at 28 years old, I found myself navigating a nightmare I never could have anticipated. Just 3 months ago, my world completely shattered when my husband, Ethan, was taken from me in a sudden, tragic car accident. The grief was a heavy, suffocating weight, leaving me entirely alone in the beautiful $800,000 house we had spent years building together. Every corner of that home held a memory, and honestly, just getting out of bed each morning felt like climbing a mountain. But family is supposed to be your anchor during times like these, right? That's what I kept telling myself when my sister, Chloe, invited me over for her son's first birthday party. I didn't want to go. I wanted nothing more than to hide under my blankets and mourn in peace. Still, I forced myself to put on a brave face, dress up, and walk through her front door, believing that surrounding myself with family would help heal my broken heart. Before we reveal the shocking trap waiting for me behind that door, comment below with a city you're watching from so I can see how far Lisa's journey reaches. As I walked into the party clutching a small Rapigift, the room was filled with the bright sounds of children laughing and music playing. But the moment Chloe locked eyes with me, the atmosphere subtly shifted. There was a strange, predatory gleam in her eyes that made my stomach instantly knot. She wasn't acting like a grieving sister supporting a widow. She was acting like a wolf waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The birthday party continued for another hour, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. I sat quietly on the edge of the sofa, trying my best to blend into the background, but Chloe kept glancing at me with a smug, knowing smile that made my skin crawl. Finally, it was time to cut the cake. Everyone gathered around the dining table laughing and taking pictures as my little nephew babbled happily. But the moment the candles were blown out, the celebration took a dark, calculated turn. Chloe stepped to the head of the table and cleared her throat, loudly demanding everyone's attention. The room fell quiet as she looked directly at me, her expression hardening into pure malice. "I have a special announcement to make," she said, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. "My son isn't just my joy, he's the rightful heir to a legacy. My son is my late husband Ethan's child." Gasps rippled through the room. My heart stopped and I felt the blood completely drain from my face. Before I could even process the horrific accusation, Chloe reached into a folder held by a man standing quietly in the corner, a man I now realized washer attorney. With a theatrical flourish, she dropped a thick legal document onto the table right next to the birthday cake, showcasing the supposed paperwork for everyone to see. "This is Ethan's secret will," Chloe announced triumphantly. "He signed it right before his accident. As his child's inheritance, I am legally taking half of your $800,000 house. You have 48 hours to pack your things." The silence in the room was deafening as every single eye turned to me, waiting for my reaction. My family members stood frozen, their mouths open in shock, looking back and forth between Chloe's smug face and me. They were waiting for the tears. They were waiting for me to scream, deny the allegations, or completely break down over the ultimate betrayal by both my late husband and my own sister. Chloe leaned forward, resting her hands on the table, practically vibrating with excitement. She was absolutely certain she had just utterly destroyed me and guaranteed herself a massive payday. I forced my hands to stay steady as I reached across the table and picked up the document. My heart was pounding, but not for the reason Chloe thought. As my eyes scanned the legal-sounding paragraphs, the forged signature, and the official-looking notary stamp, a sudden, overwhelming wave of clarity washed over me. I looked at the exact wording of the claim, and it took every single ounce of my willpower to keep my jaw from dropping. Instead of exploding in anger, I took a slow, deep breath and let my face fall into an expression of utter defeat. I stared at the paper for a long moment, then looked up at my sister and whispered quietly, "Oh, I see." Chloe's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a predator who believed her prey had completely surrendered. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully backed me into a corner where I had no choice but to give up half of my home. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly comprehend, was that her greedy little trap had just handed me the ultimate weapon. I lowered my head, biting the inside of my cheek, desperately trying to hold back a burst of absolute laughter. Chloe's lawyer stepped forward, adjusting his tie with a cold, professional indifference that matched the smug look on my sister's face. He pulled a second document from his briefcase and slid it across the table toward me, right over the remains of the birthday cake. "Mrs. Whittaker," he said, his voice dripping with synthetic authority, "to ensure this transition is as painless as possible for everyone involved, my client is offering a standard settlement. You have exactly 48 hours to sign over the property deed, granting Chloe 50% ownership of the primary residence. If you refuse, we will immediately file a public lawsuit, contest the estate, and tie up all of your assets in court for years." Chloe smirked, crossing her arms. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Lisa. Just think of your nephew. Hedda serves his father's legacy, and I won't let you hoard what rightfully belongs to my son." I didn't argue. I didn't say a single word to defend Ethan's memory or protect my own rights. Instead, I carefully folded the paperwork, placed it inside my purse, and walked out of the party into the cool evening air. When I arrived back at my empty, quiet house, the silence was overwhelming. I sat alone in the living room, looking around at the walls Ethan and I had painted together, pretending to be the panicked, grieving widow they expected me to be. But beneath that calm facade, my mind was racing. I picked up my phone and dialed the one person I knew I could trust implicitly, my estate attorney, David. "David, we need to meet first thing tomorrow morning," I said. "My sister just tried to spring a trap and I need you to help me snap it shut." The next morning, the sun streamed through the windows of David's office, but the atmosphere inside was intense and focused. I sat across from him, watching his face darken as he carefully read through the fraudulent will and the aggressive settlement papers Chloe's lawyer had handed me at the party. David shook his head, a look of profound disgust crossing his features. "Lisa, this signature is a clumsy forgery, and the notary stamp looks highly suspicious," he said, leaning forward. "We can easily contest this in court, but it will take time and a public battle will be incredibly stressful for you during your period of grief." I leaned back in my chair, a calm, steady smile spreading across my face. "David, we aren't going to drag this out in a long court battle," I said quietly, "because I have a piece of information that makes this entire claim completely impossible. And it's a secret Ethan and I kept entirely private from the rest of the family." David looked at me confused as I reached into my bag and pulled out a certified, sealed folder from our family doctor, a document I had kept safe for years. I pushed the medical file across the desk. "Open it," I instructed. David broke Thesiel, unfolded the pages, and began to read the clinical summary. Within seconds, his eyebrows shot up in absolute amazement. The medical records were conclusive and undeniable. 5 years before Ethan and I had even met, he had been diagnosed with absolute, irreversible male infertility. It was physically, biologically impossible for him to ever father a child. Chloe's son could not possibly be Ethan's. My sister had built her entire extortion plot around a massive lie, completely unaware that science would destroy her. The conference room at Morrison & Associates was suffocatingly quiet when I walked in the next morning. Chloe and her attorney were already seated on one side of the long mahogany table, their expressions projecting an air of absolute triumph. Chloe looked at me with a patronizing smirk, while her lawyer smoothly arranged the final property transfer papers right in front of them. My attorney, David, sat quietly by my side, keeping his face perfectly neutral as he placed his briefcase on the table. "We're glad you decided to be reasonable, Lisa," Chloe's lawyer said, sliding the deed modification paperwork across the polished wood toward me. "Signing this now avoids an incredibly messy public court battle that would only bring shame to your late husband's memory. It's best for everyone if we settle this family matter quietly today." I didn't say a single word. Instead, I reached into my purse, took out a pen, and calmly pushed the documents right back toward Chloe. I think it's only fair that the rightful claimant signs her name first, I said, keeping my voice steady and completely devoid of emotion. Chloe grinned eagerly, snatching up the pen without a moment of hesitation. She scribbled her signature at the bottom of the page, completely validating her claim under penalty of perjury and locking herself into her fraudulent narrative. Her lawyer smiled, believing they had just successfully stolen half of my $800,000 home without lifting a finger. The moment her pen left the paper, my defeated look completely vanished. I looked at David, who opened his briefcase and pulled out the certified medical file alongside a freshly drafted countersuit. We slammed them down on the table right in front of Chloe. "What is this?" she asked, her smile faltering. "Those are Ethan's medical records proving his absolute infertility," I said, enjoying the way her face turned entirely pale. "And that is a lawsuit for fraud, forgery, and grand larceny. You just signed a fraudulent document under oath." Her lawyer's eyes went wide as he stared at the clinical proof. He packed his briefcase and walked out, leaving Chloe completely alone to face the consequences. What would you have done to a sibling who betrayed you like this? Comment your thoughts below, and check out the 2 favorite stories on your screen right now for more mind-blowing twists.